Yeah, I know. I get it. I really do. No one knows better than I do. Oh, hello, Sam. Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to my channel. Today, if you couldn't read the title, first off, you should probably find a different video. If you could not read the title, today's video is about The Shining. Obviously, if you haven't read The Shining, I suggest that you go do so and then come back to this video because there will likely be a lot of spoilers, as usual. This is more of a discussion and talk through than it is an actual review because I suck at giving reviews. If you have read The Shining, then I suggest that you go to the comment section down below and start a conversation. Because that's exactly what these videos are for, is for us to talk about The King. King is the third book that Stephen King published under his own name. And it is about a young family that take a job at a hotel where the father is the caretaker during the winter months, and a lot of crazy stuff goes on. Now, The Shining is a book that I have very mixed feelings about. I wouldn't say my feelings are as mixed with The Shining as they are with Carrie, because I don't really care for Carrie, as I said in my Carrie video. If you haven't watched that, I'd suggest going over and watching it. All work and no play makes Jack a dull, dull boy. Yay! I asked you guys on Instagram to give me topics or things to dissect when it came to The Shining, and some of you did. Some of you were more interested in the movie version, but that's not what this video is about. That's a future video, actually. And I'm not so big about filming either. The Shining is a reread for me. I actually read The Shining very early on when I discovered King's writing. And when I read The Shining, I hadn't seen any of the movies for The Shining. I had no idea what The Shining was about. The only thing I had ever seen from The Shining was like the two little girls in the movie and, you know, the "here's Johnny" part, because you have to live under a rock to have never seen those things. But my first time reading through The Shining, I liked it, but it wasn't the best. Now, you have to think, I read The Shining after I read Pet Sematary. And spoiler alert, Pet Sematary at this moment is my absolute favorite Stephen King book ever. It terrified me. So to go from that to any book next would obviously have some sort of downfall unless the book was better. And since, in my opinion, it's not, it was just a little lukewarm. I was like, oh, this is good, but not as good as Pet Sematary. Which, to be honest, none of his books are as good as Pet Sematary. That one is just amazing. I'm excited to do that video and to reread that book. But The Shining for me has always been just I can take it or I can leave it. It's another one of those books where I'm very happy that I read the book, but not always keen to reread it. And this time when I reread it, I listened to the audiobook for most of it. I read most of the beginning and then I listened to the audiobook for the rest because I was getting very impatient. Now, thing is that with the reread, I actually appreciated the book a little bit more this time. I enjoyed the story a lot more this time than I did the first time I read through it. And I think that will probably be a recurring factor in the rereads. I can't say obviously with the ones I haven't read, but the ones that I have read and that I reread, I feel like I'll probably appreciate them a little bit more this time around, just because I know mostly what to expect. Obviously memory hasn't carried completely over. There was quite a few things with The Shining that I had forgotten, and I was like, holy crap, King, you're a genius. And then feel very envious that I am not as smart as he is. But one of the biggest points of the story is Jack's slow downfall into madness. And when I do my episodes on the book versus movie versus remake, I can get a little bit more into that madness that's in the book versus that madness in the I can get a little bit more into that madness that's in the book and that madness that's in the Kubrick movie, because guess what, I'm not a fan of the Kubrick Shining. So many people think I am absolutely crazy when I say that. I'm just not. And I think actually one of the things that soured The Shining in my memory right after I read The Shining, Kubrick's version was on TV and I watched it. I wanted to kill him. I get why a lot of horror fans like it, but it's just not for me. And I need to stop talking about it because this is for another video. We're talking about the book, Christy, the book. I think that my favorite part of the book is Jack. Because Jack goes through such a slow but purposeful transformation. It's very unique to me, at least. I think there's a lot of writers out there who have written about people slowly going mad, and none of them quite touch what King did with Jack Torrance, or with any of the characters, if we're being honest. It's a cool book to dissect because there's so many different perspectives that you could take. Because I wonder if Jack had never gone to the hotel, if he slowly would have descended into madness anyway. That maybe the hotel just magnified that descent and sped it up. Because one of the points in the beginning of the book is that Jack had already lost his mind in some ways, and most of that was contributed to his drinking. But you know, a drunk man tells no tales, right? So Jack and his sanity are the key points of the book, and they are the stars of the story. There's obviously everything to do with The Shining as well, and with Danny. And all of that's also very interesting to me, which is probably why I was such a fan of Dr. Sleep when I read it, because Danny was the cutest, and his abilities are amazing. Is your foot in front? Very nice. Danny's abilities are amazing, and I think it's always so cool when a writer can write about things like psychic abilities and not come across as really cheesy or really dorky about it. Because obviously there's a lot of books where people are psychics or they have these powers and you're like, wow, this sucks. And with The Shining, it doesn't take you from the story when it talks about it, and it's not what am I looking for? What word am I looking for? It's not distracting. It's so well written that you just take it for a fact. Now, The Shining, for the most part, to me, is a very good book. I think it's very well written. I think that there are parts that are very scary in this book. There were a lot of times that listening to the audiobook, especially, where I was like sitting on pins and needles waiting for what happened next, despite having read the book before and seen the movie and the miniseries. So I think that it's very well written. My problem with The Shining is two things. One, it is so overhyped. So overhyped. There are King fans that swear that this is the scariest book he has ever written. And they will go to their graves saying this. And if you're one of those people, good for you. Okay? That's very nice of you. But it's not the scariest book that King ever wrote. It's not. My second problem with The Shining, and probably the reason why I think that it's not the scariest book King has written, is because The Shining, to me, is boring. The Shining is boring. I'm sorry. It is. I feel like the beginning starts here. And it slowly moves up and you get very interested in the characters. And then we get to the hotel and things just kind of do this for a while. And then they slowly do this for a little bit. And then there'll be a moment where it like shoots up and then it just goes flat again. And then it shoot back up and then it go flat. And then the very end is just like, okay, it's got an amazing ending. I'm sorry. It's freaking heartbreaking to read the end of that book. Like Danny going to the doctor when they get to the hotel. I'm sorry, that entire portion of the doctor visit was just a pain to listen to and to read through. I think for most of it, I just kind of zoned out. And that may be a fault of my own, but more often than not, it's a fault of the writers. And I can say that because I do that sometimes. Sometimes I do exactly like King does, and I get too caught up in the characters, and I forget where my story is supposed to go. And sometimes I repeat myself a lot, or so I've heard. And I love passive voice, I hear. Yeah, I have my faults. Don't tell anybody though. Also, Tony, You are a cute cat, Tony. Tony. Seriously, what was up with Tony? I mean, he was nowhere near as cute as this Tony. Nowhere. Character was nowhere near as amazing as this Tony right here. Because I love this Tony so much. He's so over my crap today. You know who you kind of look like, Tony? You look like that cat at the dinner table meme. Hey, you just sit right here. Sit right here. Okay, now look. Go. Meow. Meow. No one asked your opinion, Ozzy. We're talking about Tony. Oh, man. I got cat hair all over me. This is why I wear black and have 2 black cats, so you can't see all the pet hair I have on me. Now, what was I saying again? Half of my editing is going to be cutting out this exact phrase. So what was I saying again? Hey, baby. What else? I also really like Wendy. I know some people don't like the character. I think probably most of those people don't like the character more from the movie than the book. But I really like Wendy's character in the book. I think that she's, I don't know, she's one of the cooler female characters that King's written for me. Just because a lot of her, for some reason, reminds me of my mom. And she's very soft and sensitive, but also she has such a fire. And it doesn't get shown all that often. But when push comes to shove, she gets to shoving. So I actually like Wendy. I know a lot of people don't, but I do. Obviously. I think the Tony thing is a little bit odd. It is Tony, right? Oh God, I really hope it's Tony. I think it's Tony. I hope I'm not just mistaking it with my cat. The little dude is odd. I think that King sort of explains it. It doesn't really explain it as much as I would like it to. But I think he does explain it somewhat. I think it's more explained in Dr. Sleep, to be honest. Which I'm so sad that it comes so late in the book order, since it was so recent. Also, another thing that probably makes me dislike The Shining in the same way that I disliked Carrie rereading it, is that when I read The Shining this time, I obviously have read Dr. Sleep, and I read Stephen King's words about Dr. Sleep, about how The Shining was mostly forgotten when he wrote it because of his previous issues. So I think a lot of people think that this book is so amazing because King was half out of his mind, and for some reason we have this idea that writers that drink are more extreme, maybe, that they're willing to go different places that, say, a sober writer isn't going to go. That was weird. We seem to have this idea that writers have to drink in order to be very good writers, that a writer who's writing drunk is more willing to go further than a sober writer like myself. I don't drink, never have, likely never will. I don't like to say never, but have no desire. And I think that it's a tired cliche, and it's absolutely stupid that if you have to rely on alcohol to make yourself a great writer, you're just not a great writer. I personally think that The Shining proves that. Because it's not King's best to me. It's not, in my opinion, it's not as bad as I feel Carrie is. I feel Carrie was just him holding himself back and a small idea that he tried to make larger. The Shining, I think, is a good book, but it's not the best. It's a good book. I give it 4 stars. I think The Shining is a very good book. I would read The Shining again. Not anytime soon, but I would read The Shining again. I think that it's a good book, and I love discussing The Shining with people. There's a lot to break down that's difficult to break down when you're by yourself, but it's very fun to break down when you're having a conversation with someone else, especially when I have a conversation with someone else about The Shining. Because, like, a good friend of mine, John Huber, I hope I said your last name right. Might be Huber. John from Skeleton Rose Media is a very big fan of The Shining, both of the book and the Kubrick movie. So when I read The Shining, he was very excited to hear my thoughts about the book, rereading it, because he knew that I didn't like the Kubrick movie and I wasn't the biggest fan of the book. So discussing it with him was fun because we had 2 different points of view about a story that we both felt passionately about our feelings about. So while these videos are in some ways fun to record, they're also not as fulfilling because it's just me talking to this camera, trying to think about what I want to say about a story that I read. And especially when it's a story that I'm not passionate about. So, like, the difference between this video and, say, my Salem's Lot video, obviously my attitude is probably very different, because with Salem's Lot, I love Salem's Lot. I've always loved Salem's Lot. I think that it's King at the beginning of what he does best. It's a great story to me. As to where The Shining is just a good book. And it's just a King book. It's a good story, but it's not what everybody says it is. Hi, Salem. Alright, guys. I have a feeling that this video is going to be a pain to edit. I also have a feeling that there's a lot that people would have rather me said about the book that I probably didn't. And if there is something that you want to talk about with The Shining, always feel free to message me on any of my social medias. I have Twitter and I have an Instagram. Those are the only 2 places you're probably going to catch me at. But I am always open to discuss anything. You don't agree with me? My inbox is open. Message me. Let's talk about it. Or you can always comment down in the comment section down below and start a conversation with someone. But be kind, because if you're not, I will find you and kill you. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for you this week. I'm so thankful that you joined me for this video that I hope is not going to be too long or too boring. You're so cute. Anyway, thank you for joining me for this video. I was so happy to have you here. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel. Leave this video a like. Make sure you're following me on all of my social medias. What? Also, My books are in the description box down below. I urge you to buy as many of them as you would like. And that's all I got for you today, guys. So, kisses, my darlings.